Hello. You may have noticed my new intro that I mentioned in my last video, and there it was. Looks like I have to step my game up to live up to the potential promised by that, but after a little unexpected vacation, I am back, and I'm talking about some handheld gaming consoles from the late 80s, early 90s, which when you hear that, you probably think of one thing. That would be the original Game Boy with the wonderful green screen, and of course, Tetris that came with it. It sold 100 million copies. It's pretty much the handheld gaming device of the 80s and 90s, and to this day, the reason why the DS and the 3DS to this day are still pretty much the de facto standards for gaming because of the path that the Game Boy managed to blaze when it was released back in 1989. But there were other devices at the time. A lot of people are familiar with the Sega Game Gear, which was basically a Sega Master System made portable. Some people know about the Neo Geo Pocket, and there's Neo Geo Pocket Color, which were sort of the Neo Geo version of the Game Boy. Much like most Neo Geo products, it was a little expensive at the time, which again made it a small niche market item. But the one that most people don't remember, and maybe even know existed, was this monstrosity here, the Atari Lynx. Now, obviously one thing you can tell, this is a lot bigger than the average Game Boy. In fact, here's a little comparison here just to show how much the size difference is. And this right here is pretty much the main reason why nothing but the Game Boy really made a big splash in the handheld market. While, yes, this graphically really couldn't compete, black and white with shades of green on here, but it did have the good games. A lot of people at the time were wondering, why did Nintendo make a color screen? Well, I can tell you. You see that in there? It's 4 AA batteries, and this thing will last, well, not forever obviously, but for hours and hours of playing time. This black and white grayscale screen was like the hybrid car of handhelds. It barely sipped the batteries and would last forever. They actually did make an AC adapter for the Game Boy. I don't have it. I didn't know for the longest time it existed. Why? Because nobody needed it. This bad boy, on the other hand, takes 6 AA's, and first of all, this makes it weigh about twice as much. When the batteries are out of it, this thing feels astonishingly light. With the batteries in it, I feel like you could really do some damage with it. This could be used as a weapon. I mean, it not just looks like a brick, it actually feels about the same weight as a brick. Now, Atari did make a AC adapter for it, and this is not really optional. If you own one of these, you pretty much have to get it, because they say the battery life takes maybe 4 to 5 hours. Most people's experience has shown that has really not been the case. Again, I guess it depends on the games you're playing to some extent, and if you're getting the good batteries or the dollar store batteries, how long they're going to last. But no matter what you do, it's really not going to make it on any decent car trips, vacations, things like that. You pretty much need to have the battery. You need to have the AC adapter for this. They do make a DC adapter for cars as well. It's a little harder to find. The Lynx only being on the market for a few years, there wasn't much of a chance to do a lot of accessories, like you see now with Game Boy and the DS. There's, anything, cases, battery backups. There's AC adapters made by tons of different companies now. Something only out for a couple of years like this, not really much time to develop anything for it. But instead of dwelling on the downsides of this, there are some really good things to the Lynx. First of all, one thing I personally like, little game cartridges. First of all, look how thin they are. You would think they missed something that would be no big deal today, but this was released in 1991, I believe. Look at here, and 92 is the copyright date on the game. And think about how they're kind of on the cutting edge, comparing it to the thicker cartridges on the Game Boy. These had their advantages. It was just the right size, that they were portable and they were not too easy to lose. These a little thinner. They're actually a lot more durable than they look. You would think something like this would be breakable. And I suppose it would be definitely more than the cartridge, but it's actually pretty durable. It slides right in flush to the game. Has a little lip here. You can pull it out. Now this is the version 2 of the Lynx. The first version is a more gray, has much bigger sides here. That most of the ones that still survive, the edging is kind of worn off because the way you hold it with your hands just kind of rubbed it off over time. But if you're looking for a Lynx, version 2 is the better one to get, just because I think it looks better, but it also fits in your hands. It's a little more playable, and it doesn't seem to wear apart as easily. The one thing about a Lynx too is you have to be careful where you buy them from. One thing that was kind of a shortcoming is that the screens would go, or you would turn it on and the screen would light up, but nothing would play. This is actually the second Lynx that I bought before I got one that works. But considering, you're talking about 20-year-old gaming technology, that could happen with anything. A lot of people have a hard time finding a 32X that works or a Sega CD that works, because anything that was had a short period of being made and was not subject to the highest quality standards sometimes doesn't really end up surviving a long time. But they're really easy to find. I picked this up for about $40. On eBay, if you have some patience and you do searches for like lots, you can find people selling Lynx games fairly cheap, new in box, for like $6 to $10. There's a couple, like 3 or 4 games that are hard to find, but for the most part, they're all pretty common. Sometimes you find them in game stores. People will sell them, usually in box. Not the easiest thing in the world to find, but if you do find a few, they're usually pretty cheap. Now, the neat thing about this, I'll turn the power on here, is that the screen, it probably won't show up too well in the video here, for a color screen, it actually looks really good. A lot of color game systems like the Game Gear, over time the screens would wash out and fade away, and it happens on here too, to a degree, but it's still very playable all these years later. Gameplay wise, it's probably similar to slightly more than an 8-bit game, not quite as much as a 16-bit game. One of those, Atari had a habit of being these weird in-between levels for their systems. Like the Jaguar wasn't quite 64-bit, a little bit of fuzzy math involved there. It's never quite as good as their competitors, but it's definitely not horrible by any stretch. There's definitely a few good games that are out there. I managed to score Ninja Gaiden, or Gaiden, depending on what side of that debate you're on, but it's a subject matter for another video. 1 and 3. For some reason 2 wasn't made for the Lynx. Not really sure how that happened, maybe some licensing issues or whatever. Got those both for about $30 new in box. Zybots is a game that seems to come up a lot on eBay. I don't know if that was one that was produced a lot or a big seller at the time, but there seems to be tons of those on eBay. When you look for Lynx games, that's going to be one of the ones that comes up a lot. I actually got a bulk of 3 games where the guy was letting you pick out of 5 games and you had to take Zybots, so that tells you how common that game is. But all in all, it's actually a pretty fun system. Definitely if you're an Atari fan, you owe it to yourself to pick it up. It's one of those things where, unfortunately, it came at the kind of the end of the lifespan for Atari in the console handheld hardware market, so it didn't really get the backing that it probably should have. The time that it was released too, there was no doubt that the Game Boy was king, and if Sega couldn't knock it off, it was in a much better position than Atari was at the time. Atari didn't really have much of a chance, but they did give it a try. I remember for the first year or two, it was a really big push, hoping maybe this would be the thing that could kind of turn things around for Atari to let them rebound to get back in the game, but it didn't really work out that way. I actually knew a person I went to high school with who actually had an Atari Lynx. I had it in a box and everything. He was pretty much the only person I've ever seen in the real world, in the non-internet friendship, that actually owned a Lynx. It's just one of those things that for a reason, just didn't catch on. Largely, I would think that it was, marketed toward kids, like most game systems were, and something of this size here was just too huge for for kids. I mean, you took something like a Game Boy, you can hold it in one hand, even kids can play it, take it anywhere. It's not exactly pocket size, not even the late 80s, early 90s parachute pants, the crisscross, oversized pants. Even these weren't pocket size for these either, so, just wrong place, wrong time, maybe in a different world when Atari had more of a budget and wasn't clinging to anything it could to try to stay alive. It may have had a better shot of marketing this in a way that was, going to be more guaranteed of a lifespan for this, but, such is life. But again, definitely something looking into for you left-handed gamers out there. If you're wondering, is this a 4-button? Actually, it's 2. What it does is it has a flip feature, so that if you're left-handed, you flip it over, you hold the console with the control D-pad with your right hand and work the buttons with your left hand. Now, personally, I've never heard of left-handed gamers having too big of a problem working handheld game systems. I don't think that was an issue. I think Atari was kind of trying to solve a problem that didn't really exist, but, they tried something different. Can't blame them for that. It certainly wasn't the biggest problem with this system by far. But, if you find this anywhere, on eBay or used game store, things like that, definitely worth giving it a try. Just make sure that whoever you're buying it from can guarantee that it works, or can at least guarantee you a refund if you get it to them and it doesn't work. But yeah, just like anything that's Atari, even if it's not all that great, it can't be bad because it has Atari on it. And like Mark from the Classic Game Room says, Atari means it's awesome. So, I'll be checking you guys out around soon. Hopefully won't be much of a delay before my next video. A little bit of real world drama sheeped in there and kind of cause things to go off the schedule I planned for it, but I'll be back making more videos, and I'll see you guys around.